in a way that I can't explain, it hurts me so badly to see what happens to this guy, because I always believed deep down that he was one of the good ones, that he was this guy that even if he was rough around the edges, even if he reminded me a lot of some of the dads that I grew up around, where it was like they didn't understand shit, like they don't understand trans people, but they're like, who cares, bro? Let them live. Like that's what I always envisioned for Joe. And then he got the Spotify contract and it's $100 million. And I don't know if you'd attribute it to that. I don't know if you would attribute it to the social isolation in Austin, Texas. I don't know if you would attribute it to him being a lot more effective of a con man than I ever realized. And here he is now. He sees an opportunity and he wants to be the biggest and he wants to be relevant and he doesn't want to fall off. And so he goes for it. But he's completely abandoned and betrayed everything that I feel like once made him special. And he's just become a mouthpiece for bigots. He defended Elon sig hailing. He had Mel fucking Gibson on his podcast to say that climate change wasn't real. And the big scam was green energy companies that were trying to scam our kids so they could make money off of it. This is a man I know knows better because I was inspired by him when he had Shane Smith on his podcast all those years ago to be like, dude, this is an insanely important issue we have to talk about. And Joe was like, wow, dude, we got to do something about this. This is crazy. You know, and I was like, we have to do something about this. This is crazy. You know, so what is your analysis of the unmaking of Joe Rogan? And how do you put it in perspective in your own mind as somebody who gave him the benefit of the doubt when a lot of people were criticizing him?
In this clip from the great people over at the Vanguard, they have Krystal Ball, who is calling out Joe Rogan for selling out to MAGA. And as you can see from the start of this clip, it's going to be exciting. Rogan built his brand on being this free-thinking, independent guy, but at some point he stopped questioning one side and just cozied up to the right. So let's just get into this clip where they'll be sharing their opinions, and of course I'll also be adding mine as we go through it. So let's get into it.
Yeah. And, you know, I still feel like torn, not really torn at this point, but I feel bad because Joe was really good to me in soccer when we launched Breaking Points, right? And I do appreciate that. I am grateful for that. But bottom line is, it's a rich guy in a bubble who goes off of like vibes versus any sort of facts or ideology. So, you know, he's, I think, quite emblematic actually of the Bernie to Trump pipeline, where it was like, you know, shifted right from backing Bernie Sanders to now based on the like vibes. I think he feels like it's like cool and punk rock, he even said this on his show, to support Trump and all this parade of horribles around him. And is now his podcast is like the #1 platform where oligarchs go on to like launder their reputations and try to enlist MAGA in some like, you know, pro-rich class war by telling them it's really about some cultural like, oh, they're debanking conservatives. That's why we need to get rid of the CFPB. That's what his podcast has become. And it's terrible. Like, it's really sad to see. It's bad for the country. And I think it was interesting to me. Probably the most revealing thing I saw is I don't know if you guys covered this. I'm sure you saw it though. Is he recently was like, "Oh, I'm not really a Republican or a Democrat. I think they
Oh
all have
God,
some
yeah,
good ideas."
bullshit.
It's like, dude, you baked that cake is baked now. You can't go endorse Trump, have him on your podcast, not push back, have all of his sycophants on your podcast, launder their reputations, go schmooze with them at the inauguration, and then still come back, "Oh, I'm an independent guy." No, you're not. Like, that ship has sailed. This is who you are now. You are an establishment Republican in league with the most powerful people on the planet. Like, all your conspiracy theorizing about how the powerful want to do this, those are your guys. Like, those are the guys that you're giving a platform to and helping in their plans of extraction and exploitation and world domination. Like, you're in league with them.
I mean, absolutely awesome point, and this is exactly the issue with Rogan now. He wants to have it both ways. He wants the street cred of being a rebellious, anti-establishment guy, while also rubbing elbows with the most powerful figures on the right. He endorses Trump, gives every major right-wing influencer a softball interview, and then turns around like, "Oh no, I'm totally independent, guys." Like, come on. If a CNN host suddenly started hanging out with Bernie Sanders, endorsing AOC, and parroting progressive talking points uncritically, would anyone still believe they're independent? Of course not. And Rogan's in the same boat. The difference is he pretends to be outside the system while actively feeding into it. And the worst part, in my opinion, is he knows exactly what he's doing, because being a real independent voice means taking shots at both sides. It means questioning whoever is in power, whether they're on the left or the right. But now Rogan will slam the left every chance he gets while letting Trump, Elon Musk, and his right-wing buddies completely off the hook. I mean, come on, that's just being a partisan hack who won't admit it. At the end of the day, you can't claim to be neutral when all your actions say otherwise. At least that's what I think.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know the explanation for like how he ends up in this place, but I think, like I said, it's just like a rich guy in a bubble whose obvious media consumption habits are horrific. Will just is incredibly gullible, will believe anything that happens to fit into his worldview and not check it before it rolls out of his mouth whatsoever. And now happens to be incredibly powerful and influential, where this is very, very damaging thing to do.
Yeah. I think for me, the first time that it really clicked with me that it was over for Joe Rogan and that he really doesn't mean much of anything that he says these days is actually when he interviewed Donald Trump and basically didn't bring up the vaccine or COVID at all, didn't push back on Trump's handling of that situation at all. Because again, it wasn't that long ago that Joe Rogan decided to turn his entire show into the let's bitch about the vaccine hour. Let's complain about the response to COVID, the lockdowns, Dr. Fauci, lab leak, etc. Which again is all valid to talk about. I actually defended his right to do it. I said it was crazy that anyone on the left advocated for censorship in that moment. I said, hey, this is a dramatic thing that's happening in society. People have the right to talk about it. People have the right to, talk about conspiratorial shit if they want to. Let's not advocate for censorship, right? But I really thought that Joe Rogan took that seriously. I really thought that it was something that kind of broke his brain, that, completely made him change the way he thought about politics. Again, the response to COVID, the lack of freedom, the, lockdowns, the vaccine mandates, et cetera, et cetera. But then he has Donald Trump on his podcast for a 3-hour-long conversation. Donald Trump is the guy who was president when that happened. Donald Trump is the guy who instituted the lockdowns, who did Operation Warp Speed, did the mandates. Joe Biden is the guy who said COVID is over, and Joe Rogan doesn't even bring it up once. He doesn't even bring it up once to Trump's face. He doesn't say, hey, if there's another pandemic, are you going to do this again? Are you going to have a different plan? No, it's just complete crickets, not even the ability to ask a single tough question, even about the thing that, like I said, he spent 2 or 3 years harping on endlessly. I'm sure everyone remembers the ivermectin. Maybe I should sue CNN because they said I took horse dewormer or some shit like that. So what was your reaction to that? Do you think that Joe ever actually really cared about the COVID stuff as much as he pretended to?
My read is a little different. I think he does care about it, but I think the vibes are that that's a Democrat liberal thing and not a right-wing Trump thing. So even though the facts are exactly as you laid out, he didn't feel like that was a thing to challenge Trump on because it's right-wing coded. So that's more of my read of that situation. And, he's always had this shtick of, oh, I'm just a comedian. Like, you can't take me too serious. And it's like, okay, that's all well and good until you're interviewing the fucking president of the United States. And then guess what? You do have some responsibility to like do some research and plan some pushbacks and have some difficult questions. Like, yes, that is incumbent upon you if you're going to accept that opportunity to interview the, candidate for the president of the United States and the former president of the United States.
I mean, come on, exactly. This is one of the biggest cop-outs in media today. Rogan loves to play the I'm just a comedian card whenever he gets called out for spreading bad information or dodging real accountability. But this is the thing. If you have a massive audience, a huge platform, and you're sitting across from world leaders, you are no longer just a comedian. Rogan hasn't been just a comedian for years. His show is one of the most watched platforms in the country. Politicians, billionaires, and influencers go on because they know it has power. The guy is shaping public opinion more than most mainstream journalists at this point. And yet, when he gets called out for letting Trump slide with zero pushback, suddenly it's, oh, I'm just a dumb guy with a mic. No, you're not. You don't get to casually interview the former president of the United States and current president of the United States and pretend like it's the same thing as talking about aliens with your comedian buddies. It's not. And it's not like Rogan can't ask tough questions. He's gone hard on other guests. He's challenged people on the left. He's had heated debates. But when it comes to Trump, he suddenly turns into Jimmy Fallon ruffling through his hair. At some point, you have to own what you've become, because he isn't a neutral, independent thinker anymore. He's just another media figure who plays to his audience, which is fine, but let's not pretend otherwise.
So I do think he believes it. I just think that he gets captured by like what's right-wing coded and what's left-wing coded. And he doesn't associate that with Donald Trump, even though it was literally Donald Trump who thankfully did Operation Warp Speed and developed the vaccines. It is just one thing I've been thinking about is one time when Sagar and I were on, I don't remember all the details of the conversation, but January 6th came up and Sagar said something that felt to him like it was downplaying it. And Joe actually jumped in and corrected Sagar. He's like, that was really terrible. Like that was bad. That was a bad thing that happened. And, kind of checked Sagar on that. So to see him go from that to now like, oh, maybe I'll do some shows at Mar-a-Lago and here I am at the inauguration, blah, blah, blah. It's like, wow, this is wild. This is really wild. But just don't, all these guys that are, Tucker and all these people that pretend like they're some independent thinkers, or Barry Weiss, is like throwing an inauguration party with Uber and laundering like deep state talking points to push war with Iran, etc. It's like, okay, you don't get to wear the independent label anymore. You are Republican, right-wing, apparatchiks, and Trump hacks. Like that's what you are. So own it and live with it and deal with it.
Yeah. Well, some people in our chat, Krystal, the other day when we were talking about breaking points, leveled a similar allegation as Sagar. They said, this guy has been honest about the fact that he's friends with JD Vance, that he knows some of these people. Are you worried that his independence as it relates to the Republican Party is at risk of disappearing due to those connections? Or do you think he's really committed to, being above it and having integrity when he discusses the potential threats to the populace of this country as they come from the right-wing Republican Party?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that with JD Vance, the vice president of the United States, like that changes Sagar's positioning. He no longer is that just pure outsider.
I agree. I mean, it's already gone. Let's not pretend Rogan is still some politically neutral, middle-of-the-road guy. He is deep in the Republican orbit now. I mean, just look at his guest list, his rhetoric, the people he's cozying up to. It's clear where his loyalties lie. I mean, even his audience eats this up. The same people who hate elites in mainstream media are now cheering on a guy who is hanging out with the most powerful people in the country. Rogan isn't an outsider anymore. He's inside the machine. And the final point that I'll make, which honestly is the thing that I don't like the most, or maybe I hate the most even, is it's not that Rogan just changed his views. It's also that he stopped thinking critically altogether. He doesn't ask hard questions anymore. He just goes along with whatever fits his new narrative, which is honestly the thing that I dislike the most. That's not free thought. That's just another version of propaganda. And you guys know how I feel about propaganda. So yeah, I mean, at this point, Rogan's independence isn't just at risk. Again, I think it's completely gone. He made his choice, and the only question is whether he'll ever admit it. Of course, as always, I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you agree with the points that I made, if you agree with the points that this clip made, let me know down in the comments below. I always want to hear your thoughts. Be sure to give us a like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one.